I was born on December the 6th, 1964, and this is going to be my childhood memories growing up from then and all through the 1970s. And disclaimer, it's the way I remember my life. Something else about school, you were asked to wear the colours of the school, which was royal blue and white. So you could have a white blouse or a blue and white summer dress. They had school dresses. Most of the children didn't, but my mum was insistent. So it's nice to see my school photos, though, did look like school uniform photos. And then I was trying to remember the names of the classes. And they were wildlife, I'm going to say. There was Puffins, which I was never in Puffins. That was kind of the class on a par with mine, but they're the children who started at the Easter and I had to start the September. I think I was a Badger. So Badger. Then there was in third year of the infant school, I was a Heron and I was in Mrs. Ridgway's class. She was okay. No one's going to match Mrs. Rye. She was okay. She was a teacher. She was probably now taking you to the transition of proper lessons and you sit down and you listen. And then the fourth year was Mrs. Smeaton. And she was so strict. She was so angry all the time. It was like she didn't want to be there. She was quite an older lady. And the equivalent to her class was the Swans, which is funny because that teacher's name was Mrs. Crane. And I liked her, but I was never, obviously, in her class. I was in Mrs. Smeaton's class. And there was some issues in that class. I don't know why, but she took an instant dislike to me. I'm guessing perhaps I didn't speak up enough. I didn't answer. As I say, only spoke when I was spoken to in the class. Maybe she wanted those noisy, active, participant children. I don't know, but I know from day one she did not like me. And as a young child, I felt that. I knew it. And then one day we were doing PE, physical education, which is like games, outside. And I always wanted a hoop at home because if there was a choice, I always got the hoop. When you could play with hoops, bean bags, balls, you could pick one. And I took the hoop. And I even had a hoop later on in years because I loved a hoop. And I was playing with the hoop, wearing my black slip-on plimsolls, which you had to have. And you always had to wear your vest and knickers. There wasn't PE wear in infant school. So I was outside and I was playing with the hoop. And Richard, now if you want to know Richard did, just go back to my last episode. Richard was outside and he came up and he said, "Can I have the hoop?" And I said, "No, I've just got the hoop. You can have it in a minute." Anyway, about 2 seconds later, he came back again and he said, "Dawn, can I have the hoop? It's my turn now." And I said, "No, I haven't had a go with it yet." So I said, "Well, how about you stand in front of me and I'll see if we can skip together. You know how you lift it over 2 people and jump, like a skipping rope, but with a hoop." And he stood in front of me and I went over like that. But he wasn't standing near enough and it got his head. Mrs. Smeaton, I swear, was looking out to cause trouble for me any possible time and she never found it. Well, she saw this and she didn't ask what had happened, nothing. She yelled and was angry and I cried. I was like, "Oh, I haven't done anything," but I can't say that to her. And she shouted and she shouted at me, and she went, "Go in the classroom, you're not coming out to play anymore." And this was like really bad. I was like, I've never been told off before like this. And I was crying and crying. I've said before, I can't take shouting. I can't do shouting. Talk to me, explain something, I'll say back what you want to know, we'll sort it out. But she was yelling and her face was red. She was so angry. Get out. Ah! And I'm only little. So I'm crying and crying and crying. So I go back to the classroom. And as I go back towards the classroom, it's quite near the kitchens where you have your dinner, where the dinner ladies make the dinner. And one of the dinner ladies was one of my mum's friends. And she happened to see me. She's like, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I went, "I am not allowed to talk to anyone," because I didn't want to tell her I'd been told off. So I went in the classroom and shut the door. Well, she obviously reported back to Mum, didn't she? I would be the child that wouldn't mention that at home. I don't know what Mrs. Smeaton did to me when she came back to the classroom. I can't remember that. So whether she did nothing, that was the moment, you're not playing anymore, but she was really nasty angry. I still remember it now. It gives me trauma now. And I'm assuming that was it. I don't know. I can't remember. It was the being accused of doing something I hadn't done, but of course I had done, but not the way she meant. Anyway, obviously this dinner lady, the friend of Mum's, obviously reported to Mum. Like, she knew I was a lovely quiet girl as well, because we went to dance school with her daughter, and she was in between me and my older sister's age, and she used to love me and cuddle me and all sorts. So they knew what I was like. So next thing I know, I think it's the next day, Mum asked me at home, and I just say, I didn't do anything. Next day, suddenly at the classroom door, throws open the classroom door. My dad is in the door saying, "Dawn, get up, come out here now, come out. And the teacher saying, "No, sit down, Dawn, sit down. I'm your teacher. You do what you're told, sit down." And I remember up, down, because Dad's saying, "Come," he's my dad. The teacher saying, "I'm your teacher. When you're in school, you do what I say," which my parents had told me that. And I'm not joking. I was up, down. Dad would say, "Come." She's saying no, and he's saying, "Come." And all the children are like, "Ooh." Ooh. And I remember this, and I was so panicked. And the headmistress has appeared, who I didn't like anyway. As I say, she wasn't children friendly. And she came behind and she went, "Dawn, come to my office now. Come to my office." First time I've been called to a head's office. So Mrs. Smeaton had to let me go. I think she realised, the headmistress, something's got to be done here. I'm probably crying by now. So we go and sit in her office, and Dad says, Mrs. Smeaton had said that, so obviously she'd been asked, Mrs. Smeaton said, "You hit a boy on the head with the hoop. Did you do that?" And I went, "Yes, I did do that. Yes." And he said to the headmistress, "Oh, I'm sorry. I really can't believe she did that." There was no side to my story. Anyway, she says, "Go back to your classroom." Obviously, Dad had gone in there, had a big row. Dawn wouldn't do that, la, 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 la. And when I went home, Dad was so angry. He said, "You hit that boy in the head, and Mrs. Smeaton said you did, and you did do it." And I don't know where that went from there, but from that day, I was panicked to go in Mrs. Smeaton's class. Luckily, I didn't have that much longer left, and I think I probably cried instead. I didn't want to go to school. It was a really big trauma, and I think Mum said, "Look, you've got another month or a couple of months, whatever. This is the last year of the infant school. You won't have to see her again. Just go and be good. Don't say anything." I never did, in first place. So that was a bit of a trauma there. Another sad thing there was my first female friend that I made there, because we talked about my first friends, was Alison. And she was a lovely girl. And I remember going to one of her parties, and it was a massive party. I don't know if she belonged to some church group or what. There was no one else from school there, but masses of children. I didn't know anyone, so that wasn't a good situation for me. But I felt pleased to know I'd been invited from school. And sadly, Alison got run over when she was very small. And this makes a running theme in my situation of making friends, which you will hear about in the future. And things happened to me making friends. So you'll hear more about that in future episodes. What was my good things I liked doing in this 4th year of infant school? Well, I remember the weighing game, and I'm sure it was Mrs. Smeaton was pleased to get me out of the classroom. Some activities you're doing in class, you were doing 2s or 3s, and every now and then there would be activity outside the classroom. She would pick people to go out and do that. And she always let me go. She said, who wants to go outside? And she always let me go. Whether she wasn't holding a grudge anymore, or perhaps she had been seen to continue holding a grudge and she was being watched, I don't know. It's all hearsay from that. But the weighing game. So this weighing game was like a long bar with 2 hooks on the end, no trays or anything. And the numbers were the weights. So they looked like plastic numbers. And I think there was a blue set for addition or something, and a red set for subtraction. There was probably a multiplication one. And what you would do, one of you would put a number on the front and a number as the answer on the other end. And then your turn, you had to put what went with the first number to balance it out. So 7. So you've got a 7, a 3, and then 10 on the other end. So 7 plus 3 is 10. And that was a game, but a learning game. And what for me has always been the best time of a school day, when that handbell rung and it was time to go home.